All right. Woohoo. Welcome to the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. After we're in our 9+ years of service here, pretty proud of that.
In the 10th year now, right?
Oh, that's ridiculous. We gotta schedule that. There's gotta be people jumping out of blimps or something for this.
It really does. Really does.
I am super happy I wrote both of you in. This is a very busy time of years. We're getting ready to ship .NET 8. We have a bunch of conferences coming up. Somehow I roped you both in. We're going to talk about David's Twitter thread, what features you want in ASP.NET Core for .NET 9, which is going to be fun. I will start, as always, because I love community, with community links. So let's go. These links are in the chat, and I have a thing. And there's a banner. I have to share all the ways. Okay, so they're all here. Not a whole bunch this week. First of all, there's this post series started by Rich Lander, and this is kind of talking about like API design and, answer some questions like, for instance, why are there more than one ways to read a file in .NET and that sort of thing. So I thought this was really interesting, and it kind of sets the stage. Yeah, so here we're talking about, different ways of reading file. What do you want? Evolution of the APIs and stuff. So
this is a good post because Rich has a series coming on, I guess, examples of these. I think we actually spent, I want to say, maybe a month or two working on one of his samples that's coming up in his next blog post. And it kind of shows the differences between going super low level and high level and the perf differences. It was fun just watching someone who wasn't steeped in writing code like that kind of have to like come in and learn and then kind of ask the experts, which he has direct access to, how to do things. And we found bugs on the way. It was fun. So this will be a fun series.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and it leads to some great discussion here and online and other places too. So it's good to kind of go deeper and not just be like, boom, here it is, but here's why we're thinking about it. And this reminded me too that we do these API reviews, like I think it's weekly, like on the .NET Foundation YouTube channel. They're continuing to go up and they're live and stuff. So all right, this is neat here. Debugging enhancements in .NET 8. This rolls up some stuff that's also been mentioned in some other posts, but just kind of showing like a lot of quality of life stuff here. Like instead of seeing a bunch of types for debugging output, seeing the actual values, which is super nice. So anyways, this is something I'm going to be happy about every single day as a developer just to see that. So that's cool. What's new in system text JSON for .NET 8? Tons of stuff here. I love seeing all the performance, also the serialization, stuff like combining source generators. So just tons and tons of stuff. I read through this. I wasn't sure I got it all, so I signed Eric up to do a .NET Conf session so he can teach me. So I'm excited to see that. Okay, a few more things. Got .NET Conf coming up. So .NET Conf itself runs November 14th through 16th. Day 1 and 2 are the 14th and 15th, and then the night of the 15th all the way through 16th. So 24 hours. We do a community 24-hour around the world stream. I had a lot of fun looking at time zones yesterday, making sure all our speakers were not scheduled to speak at 3 a.m. their time. So that is coming up. So before that starts, there's a student zone. So that's November 13th. This is great for beginners and learners. And the idea is you can show up, you can get started with .NET during that day, and then you can show up for the rest of .NET Conf. Anything else that seems interesting to you, you've got more stuff you can learn. So this is, a great free thing. It's run by our by a lot of great community leaders and covers a lot of different things: AI, backend, front end, mobile, and game, etc. So good stuff there. Also, if you're getting started with .NET, we have this .NET certification that just came out on Free Code Camp. And we're actually, we have these live series on Learn Live that'll walk you through those. So a lot of great alternatives, and including international, spoken in Korean and Chinese, and also in Taiwan. So very cool. Okay, this is something that was new to me. I've been paying a little more attention to unit testing again lately, and I was seeing this on contract testing. So this is an interesting, I don't know if you folks have seen this. The idea is for testing microservices. It's not just on, so he kind of talks about that there's, you can do integration testing, but it can be slow and there's interactions and stuff. And the idea with contract testing is you're more validating the agreed contract. So it shows.
What does that mean? That the code doesn't run? It's just validating the spec?
So I think it is verifying both consumer and provider, and also the format of what's transmitted between them. So I don't know. It didn't go super deep. I was looking at the code a bit. So the idea here is here's a test, and you're verifying both what you receive and what you're outputting and stuff. So he's doing kind of a high level walkthrough of, and then here's the provider test too, right? So you're validating, I guess, more like all the different parts of it, not just when I'm called, this is what I respond with. Then I saw that he's writing about this pact.net, and there's this whole pact foundation, and there's a bigger thing. So I don't know. It's something I'm going to explore more, but I just thought it was interesting. There's a whole pact foundation. What the hell's going on over there? So it's exciting. A new thing to learn about. I will put us down in a different spot because I'm going to hit our other tabs. There it is. Okay, a little bit of spiciness here today. So Andrew's been walking through a lot of stuff with .NET 8, and he did this on should you use the .NET 8 identity endpoints? And his basic premise was no, you should not. So I thought it was interesting. There we are. Go over there. So he talks through, what they are. He's already kind of gone over those, and he explains what they do. I'll put the font size a bit, what they solve. High level to me, we've always had ASP.NET Identity, but it's kind of been baked into MVC and Razor Pages as a response request server-side identity solution. It doesn't work well with APIs and SPAs, and so that's this thing in .NET 8. And here he talks through here's some of the different ways that you can integrate them. What he's saying is okay, so these APIs allow for you can have bearer tokens, you can set them up with that, you can manage API without requiring a server-side page interaction. So he's got a bunch of stuff about why he doesn't think it's the best option. Yeah. So what I think this was kind of the main one that I took away from it was bearer tokens in the browser should be avoided when possible.
Fully agree. I'm not going to hear me argue with that.
So is the idea here that basically, okay, but it's not always possible to avoid bearer tokens, and then there's also the cookie, you can use cookies instead. I'm not sure.
I think Andrew has some good points in the post. Maybe I don't agree with the conclusion, wholesale. But for the most part, the identity endpoints basically let you do cookies from a SPA.
Mm-hmm.
All right, having built-in endpoints for doing the common operations, so you can build your own UI. So it kind of has two purposes. One is if you have to build custom UI in your framework of choice, could be Blazor or Angular or React or whatever, you can then have the UI be filled out by calling the backend APIs to get to sign up, to change users, in general. The login endpoint is probably the one that's the most sticky.
Yeah.
By default, we do want cookies to be the default for SPAs, and then the reason we did bearer tokens was for simple APIs and for mobile apps.
Oh, right. You don't really have options for mobile apps, right? I
You
mean,
can use cookies. It's just not
Painful.
great to
Don't do
use
that to
cookies
yourself.
in non-browser clients.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really good point about scaling up or being tied to kind of like the aspnetcore specific identity system. I think if you're in a polyglot environment where you have other kinds of like apps that are not .NET, you definitely wouldn't want to use this, right? Because then like how do you pass this token to your Java app or your like Python app or whatever? So there's some places where you don't want to use it, but I think in general for the scenario where you have a backend and a front end SPA, like it really is better to use this than to spin up an OIDC server. And no matter what anyone tells you, it's really hard to hide the details. Like, and we've seen all the attempts, but you basically have to understand this bare minimum of scopes and apps and like all these primitive concepts to even get a token, exchange a token for credentials, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's very easy to get wrong. At least this has been like reviewed and gone through community review and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to something you'll write on your own.
Yeah, and the other thing to bear in mind is we know this is a area that there are rightfully very strong opinions in the not just our community, but in the ecosystem about. And we are definitely not the only stack who has some built-in authentication / authorization / identity support that others feel that is lacking and they need to go off and do something else. And as others have pointed out, including Andrew in this excellent post, because he only ever does excellent posts, is that this is an evolving area too. The specs are still being written, and this is very much a cat and mouse game between vulnerability, people seeking vulnerabilities and developers wanting convenience. They just make it work, make it easy. It's like, well, I'm sorry, it's just not that easy. It's just not. And
what's funny is like on the note about security, there have been 2 changes to like flows that everyone were using, the implicit flow and then the code flow. Like first you were supposed to use implicit flow from SPAs for OIDC, and then that was insecure. It was broken, and then code flow is one you're supposed to use, and then you're supposed to use code flow with PKCE because another thing was found. So I think there's a lot of angst around not using the industry standard, yet there's a reluctance to kind of, you have to kind of understand it. It's really hard to hide things that bleed. We tried really hard with Duende and the previous version, but it's really hard to make it simple for these cases. It doesn't scale down super well. Is my take.
And the thing that I guess we would say again, which we've said before, is that not all of our customers are the same. We have customers who are like Andrew, who are very well versed, have no problem in going off deep into a new problem area like this that is very daunting and continually changing, and feeling confident that they can make the right decisions. And then there are others who literally just want something turnkey, and they never want to talk to an outside service for this. They don't want to have to rely on OS or platform auth. They just have, in what is in their views, very simple requirements. And that is why we keep investing in the built-in stuff, is because there are customers who will not use a third-party identity provider. We might recommend that, we would say to people, you should use a third-party identity provider. That is kind of the industry best practice now, whether it's Entra from us, or whether it's OpenID, or pick your poison. I don't care. Or use a white box style self-host product. What's the one that we were looking at, Fowler? The Go one? Is it Go? No. Which one is it?
You mean
the container that you just run IDP in a container? What's that one called? Something thread, something steel, something. What is it? Oh,
no,
what was it?
It's
going to bug me now.
Yeah, it's
my mid-40s brain can't remember these things like they used to. So use something like that.
Keycloak, right? Keycloak.
There you go.
Yeah.
Eventually. But to Fowler's point, KeyCloak implements the standards, and then that gets exposed to you. You can't avoid it. And a lot of the time, that's fine. Like, I've been around long enough that I've implemented one version of OpenID Connect as a client before, or written custom OAuth flows to some external provider. But doing that well and doing it, integrating it deeply into your app with the concept of permissions and scopes and all that type of stuff is hard, and not everyone wants that. And so we've tried to focus very much on how do we make something more approachable and simple for folks who just have, just have first party auth requirements where they own all the pieces of the app, whether it's the SPA front end and the aspnetcore back end and some other aspnetcore service, or a WinForms app and an aspnetcore API, or whatever it might be. They own all the pieces, right? And so that does simplify the requirements somewhat. But we also fully understand why there are people like Andrew and many others who strongly feel that, no, that's not a good approach. All people should be doing this other way, because you'll ultimately likely need that. Or if you ever do need a thing, it'll be easier. And as Fowler said, like we just don't come to the same conclusion. Like we just know that we have lots of customers who just flat out, when we talk to them and we interview them, and we've talked to them over many years, just say, no, I just don't need those things. They're far too complicated for my requirements. And so, this is not about us saying everyone should use identity endpoints or everyone should even use the inbox identity. As Andrew, again, points out in this article, there's a lot of functionality in aspnetcore identity, and it's kind of deceiving. If you've never been exposed to this stuff before, you think it's a registration page and a login page, and that's it.
There's so much.
And there's a lot more stuff going on under the covers and a lot more pages exposed. And so all that's been replicated in endpoints now. But it is very specifically about the two scenarios that Fowler said. Like we still recommend, if it's a browser-based scenario, use cookies. That's the simplest, most secure solution still today. Identity endpoints will allow you to do that because you can return a cookie from those API calls and still use cookie auth. And if you're using a rich client or another client other than the browser, you can now use tokens. And so, and if it's not first party, then you use one of the many other options available to use an external identity provider. So
I saw a comment that says that you shouldn't use ROPC anymore.
Yeah,
ROPC
so that's
I
think that's Damian Bowden. And I trust everything he says.
I agree. His articles, it's amazing how many articles he cranks out on off. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to kind of clarify why this literature is in the OIDC spec and why what we're shipping looks like this, which is not the recommended practice, but why it's okay to ship it, right? So the whole idea is that if you're doing first party auth, if you own the server that is accepting credentials and you are storing passwords, it is fine to send the username and password for that specific app to your specific backend to get a token for that call, right? The reason you don't want to do this normally with OIDC is because you're delegating auth to an external service, a third-party service. So you have an app called John's Great App, and you want to accept Google credentials. There's no way I'm going to trust John. Sorry, John, I don't trust you. With
your Google password.
My credentials for Google, right?
Yeah.
So ROPC basically tells you don't do an OAuth 2 server, an OIDC server, where you're taking credentials. Where you're sending credentials directly to the auth provider for the app. So don't share your credentials for the third-party auth server with this random app that you don't know where it came from.
Yeah, right? Imagine there was a sign in with Google button on Damian.com, and when you click it, it just pops a form on Damian.com and asks for your username and password. And then I send that username and password to Google and log in.
Exactly.
That's what it is, basically. Right. And it's funny, when we were researching this, we looked around at I looked at the apps I have installed on my machine, and I looked at the number of apps that use this a variant of this flow for this scenario where it's first party. Like the NVIDIA app asks for the NVIDIA username and password and then sends it to the endpoint. It's not doing a flow. It's not doing OIDC. It's their app and it's their endpoint. So I'd have no problem putting my NVIDIA credentials into the NVIDIA app. Yes, there are, and because it's no different than if I went to NVIDIA.com and I put my username and password into nvidia.com. Now, there's a whole other discussion about whether passwords themselves should be removed from the face of the earth. And absolutely, there's lots of great efforts underway with things like passkeys and whatnot
Passkeys.
to reduce their importance, right? And so we're a long way to go, but
what even are passkeys? Or I don't even know
like
what they are, honestly.
Private key pair. It's
Okay.
like SSH keys.
Yeah, there's a new standard in the browsers, a bunch of APIs, and then there's a flow that you implement with a bit of JavaScript and some server stuff, and like, you know, classic negotiate this, do a nonce, do a thing, do a blah 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 back and forward. Yeah, and you can effectively use a physical machine, like a browser, like or an app running on a physical device, as a credential once you've done that initial flow. And that includes signing up for a site for the first time. You can say, hey, I'm a new user. I'm going to register with a passkey. And then the site in their database only knows you as that passkey ID. They have no credential. They don't have a password for you. They just have that ID. So
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I admit, like the concept of passkeys, like I've set them up a couple of times on Google and stuff. I still don't really get it as a user. Like I'm not sure if that passkey is tied to my machine. And then I go to another machine and it asks for my passkey, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like I've got YubiKeys as well. Like I still hasn't really sunk in how that. I actually implemented a passkey implementation in JavaScript, and then but I still don't quite understand the user flow as a user.
I was honestly hoping you would clear it up for me because I've said
maybe someone in the chat.
Yeah,
someone says it is tied to your machine, which was my instinct. Which is why it was kind of strange to me when I did it on my Google account. I went to some other machine and said, right, now sign in with your passkey. And I'm like, but I'm on a different machine. Like, I can't do that. Why is it prompting me for that? Like, it actually made it more confusing.
Is it tied to your machine? I thought so, but like, so mine for GitHub is stored in my 1Password. And I went to my phone and I signed in. Is it like what
1Password has a passkey implementation? And so that will roam is my assumption. Is my
guess. What I thought. Like, so
how else,
why
else would they do it that way, right?
So is it tied to the machine, or is it tied to
the? Tied to. I think it's tied to whatever it's stored in. And by default, like in the browser, it's tied. I thought passkeys in Edge were synchronized if you signed in with Edge, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, it could be that.
It's like Jeremy's saying it depends on the thing storing the passkey. That's what makes most sense. I admit, I'm just reverse engineering this.
It's private keys,
like what I understand. Keys. And so like it makes sense to me that if I sign into Edge and use passkeys, they would be synchronized because they would ultimately be stored in my profile in the cloud. Whereas if I just use Windows ones and I'm not signed in with an MSA, it's just stuck on my local machine. Yeah. There you go. So that makes sense.
So I've had some like where I sign up and it's stored on my phone, and then it's like, do you want to use the passkey from your phone? But then it's like, I don't have a passkey for this domain on your phone. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. And then like to Fowler's point about using a password manager, which I also use, like it then adds another element of like, wait, where did I put that passkey? Is it in Edge? Is it in Windows? Is it in my 1Password? Like, oh God, where did I put it? It's like, it doesn't solve everything. It's just yet another thing I have to think about. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, so what we're here to talk about today is David shared this. David tweeted about this thing here. I'm sharing. I realized I used a different window. I'm now sharing my live Twitter window, which what could go wrong? There it is. Okay, so let's put us over here. So I just saw this fun thread pop up, and I was like, hey, let's do it live. So, so you tweeted about what are some features you want in .NET 9 and C# 13, and I don't know, there are just some cool responses, and I thought we could just kind of talk through some of them. So I'm zooming some. I will try to help you, Shreyas, but I don't know because it's Twitter, and they do all these things where they don't want to embrace the web. So
you could use Zoom, but yeah. That seems large online, but anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the first things here was about like threading and WASM. I don't know. Is this something we want to?
There's an experiment. I think we added experimental support, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. So in this release, the WASM runtime, which is the mono-based runtime, I thought did add experimental support. Is WASM threading like ratified? Is that actually like over the line yet? Like in the spec?
I don't know.
Okay.
But people seem to want it. What I find funny about it is multi-threading makes everything hard.
It does.
And like JavaScript basically like got away from that. So in the browser, you're very happy and there's no locks and no threading. And the first thing people ask for in Blazor WASM is, can you give me threads so I can have starvation in the browser?
I can shoot myself in the foot. No, I mean, I get it, right? Like,
No,
and, the web
sense.
has other things like
sense.
web workers and stuff, which are parallel adjacent or another, like you can do things, but they're not, some people just want threads. They just want to be able to do stuff using similar threading models. Says it was ready to try in Chrome 70. I'm assuming we're way past Chrome 70 because that was in 2019. That's probably way out of date.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to find info on some of this stuff? Here we go. Threading proposal. WebAssembly. GitHub.com/WebAssembly. No, this still doesn't help me.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat know, is it actually like done? Is threading like finished?
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I should have known this was going to come up, but there's already, we talked threading. People are already saying, what about green threads and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Well, so there's been an update on that. You should read Fowler's other tweet from last week.
Oh
we had a super good update about green threads.
Yeah.
Which basically said we aren't doing them, but at least there's a very good kind of long, the first post was very high level saying, we looked at doing them and we had like an existential crisis thinking about, do we want to have a third model?
Yeah.
Do we want a third model? Like, do we want to have tasks, value tasks? And do we then want to have new sync APIs for every async APIs that only work well?
The previous models, the deprecated APM models.
Yeah, exactly. Those are previous ones, right?
And the evented asynchrony model.
Yep.
So then there'd be all these models that could, like, you could very easily be crossing the streams.
Yeah.
Right.
There were also some interesting technical challenges that don't exist in Java and Go because Java and Go don't have programming primitives that kind of let you do things like pin memory.
Right.
So you can fix memory and you can pass it to native code, which means the GC can't move it. So you can't copy stacks. So there are a lot of like small things like that make the implementation more difficult. Not impossible, just more difficult. And our implementation just allocated a big enough stack so we didn't have to kind of like grow it. Typically, these systems allocate like a super tiny stack in the runtime. And as you run, they hit the end of the frame and they allocate more stack space. And the two strategies are normally you allocate a new blob memory and you have a linked list of blocks, or you basically copy, right? So you allocate new memory and you double the size or whatever, and you copy the previous stack state. Yeah. And the goal actually started with the linked list approach. They're called link stacks. And what ends up happening is if you get unlucky and you land, and let's say you're doing a hot for loop, and you end up like on the edge, on the boundary of the linked list, what can end up happening is you can end up pushing and popping. So you end up allocating on the boundary over and over. That is called the hot split problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing that makes performance unpredictable because it can happen anywhere in your code base at any point in time based on how deep you are in the call stack. And goals.
Isn't it funny how like everything comes back to there's no free lunch?
I think it's free, right?
Like,
the other super cool issue that happens with green threads is when you do have a tight loop, normally the OS can preempt and run arbitrary code on other threads because it just knows how to do that stuff. We would have to implement the same thing, or we just say like when you're in a hot loop on a green thread, that thing is done. And you basically, at that point, you lose the benefits of the thread being green because you're burning an actual core doing high CPU work.
Okay. So
there were some trade-offs to be made.
So part of that, just to finish on that, is also .NET is kind of optimized for interop. Like we do, that's one of the key things, right? Is that p-invoke and platform interop. .NET made a bunch of choices in its runtime that optimize that type of stuff because we don't have managed implementations of like everything. Like we call out to the OS to do a lot of stuff, including crypto and networking and a bunch of stuff. Whereas on other stacks that use green thread style stuff, they implement everything in user space in the managed area. So they limit interop because, as Fowler pointed out, one of the challenges is if you're not actually running on real threads, when you do need to do something at the platform level, now there's a crap ton of work you have to do to set up an OS thread to execute what you wanted to execute. And then you have to deal with real asynchrony, for example. If it's an async API, you can't fake it anymore. And so introducing yet another way to do that would also mean, but what happens when you hit one of these cases where you have to call out to the OS? Like this, it's just not free. Doesn't matter what we do. Like it's kind of a fundamental thing that's different about how we do stuff. So
yeah. Cool. All right. Let me see. So next general one, let me see. I don't know, performance improvements for Blazor. I mean, there's continual stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about anything?
Those are mostly my assumption. My assumption is that is talking about Blazor WASM specifically.
my guess.
Is my guess. Because that's kind of where it shows up the most right now, obviously.
There's a big thing in 8, right? Like the JIT-terpreter was the big improvement in 8.
Yeah, I don't know how big of a deal it'll be for your scenario, but
yeah, it depends.
there are constant improvements being made.
Let me see. Debugging with HTTP client network issues. Gosh, I don't know.
I have a theory. I mean, so like, whenever you're in the cloud, everything is virtual. There's like layers of networking underneath you, and like packets get lost. And like when you get a failure, you're trying to figure out which layer caused a failure. Was it the time because of DNS? Was it because of like the call itself? And it's really hard to know without doing real network debugging. And how do you get a network trace in the cloud?
How do you get a wire trace from a random virtual how many layers of switching in the data center?
Yeah, I mean, you do get more of that, like with the telemetry, open telemetry and stuff, a little bit.
But yeah, but I think the thing Fowler is alluding to is that the thing I have to keep reminding myself with networking is that ultimately it's not magic. It feels like magic until you start looking at it and like you understand what happens when it's like an Ethernet frame happens and then like a packet goes out and how TCP/IP works. It's like everything is just guessing. Like it's all just timeouts. Everything is fudged. It's like, well, there's no such thing as a live connection to another machine. It's still made up, right? It's not like there's a live electrical signal and we're measuring resistance across. We're not doing that. Like we're sending data through pulses in physical or through radio waves, and we're just waiting some time window to see if we get another one. And if we don't, then the protocol decides if we retry or we just say, screw you, I didn't hear from you. And we send a final packet to say, well, just in case you do get this, I don't care anymore, right? Which is what this message is. And like, so once you realize that, like to Fowler's point, it's like once you're like remote and you're in the cloud, like it's always going to fail somewhere. Yeah. Now, I appreciate that it does suck if you seem to be seeing consistently, things that are just stopping. And having worked in data centers and stuff before, like sometimes it's bad firmware on a switch. Sometimes it's a corrupted routing table. Sometimes like there's so many things that can cause networking issues. I'm not sure like putting more logging in HTTP clients is going to help you. You know what I mean? Like
we do have an item to ship a logging stream so you can see the bytes. That helps you when you're like in an environment where you can't just run Wireshark or something. We have it in Kestrel. But it's not a thing you turn on because it'll like destroy performance, right? It's literally logging all the bytes over the network, which is sometimes are encrypted, so it's not always super useful. So you have to put it in the right place before it gets encrypted. Yeah.
Wow. I'm sure it's probably changed again by now, but this reminded me when we were talking about how crazy networking is. I remember at some point it was saying that cable internet works by basically sending, like packing internet frames into what was expected to be video. So a series of images. So it's just like, so instead of a JPEG, here's a frame of data. It's like, okay, yeah, why not? It works.
It's great, isn't it?
Okay, this one was interesting here from Tolga about easier usage for binding options and secrets in JSON. I kind of agree on this. I don't have an idea of how to fix it, but like some magical syntax, like right now, you have to do a little bit to like reach into config and say, get me this config value.
Yeah.
You want like
They-
a type provider type thing, like just
I don't
magic members from JSON type of stuff, or
it could be easier. Right now we have it. It's a little bit explicit where you have to first declare the type, which you can't not do.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so that's like the thing that is required anyway. And the question is, what is the gesture to make that type be populated from some
Right.
section, right? And we don't
From
have any
something.
defaults on purpose. Like we don't assume the name of the type exists in config and you can
Right.
it. If you look at Spring is like annotation heavy. So you would have an attribute on your class and it would magically just like get serialized from
get rehydrated from
right?
config.
Yeah.
We're never gonna do that
Yeah.
until I quit. Until I quit and they'll do it after I leave. I'm pretty hardcore about that level of magic not being there by default.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
There
sure
has to be
too.
some
People,
kind of step.
that's the thing too. You could have from like a NuGet package or whatever, right? That adds
Yeah.
magic attributes or does something if you want to.
I mean, you
Oh,
could
yeah.
imagine, it's funny how much of this ends up looking like minimal API, right? Like you could imagine an API where you call a method and you give it a string, which is your route, which is like the section in config, and then you just have some parameters and it just like finds them to the parameters
from
for
block.
you, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
From configuration, right?
Yeah, like that would be
Model
super
binding.
trivial for us
Yeah.
to build. And then you could basically do inline binding to variables or complex types with sort of inferred rules, like the type of stuff we have in minimal API.
Well,
The question is, where are you using it and what are you doing it for, right? So
yeah, that does sound interesting. Actually, like a from config attribute that
Yeah.
just is like, and then it'll reach into the config system whatever configuration I've set up
Yeah.
in that environment. All right. .NET Watch. Thoughts on .NET Watch in general? I feel like it's I feel like it works a lot of the time. I feel like when I go into it expecting it to maybe work, then it's awesome. But then I'll work with other people that are like newer to .NET and expect .NET Watch to always catch everything, and you know what I mean. And they're surprised. Yeah.
I have a very soft spot in my heart for .NET Watch. We've been there since its inception. It was built by the ASP.NET team, before when we were building DNX. We did a lot of updates to it in .NET 6. The primary dev who worked on it unfortunately left the company, and then it moved teams. And so .NET Watches are now actually owned by the tooling team. I'm not aware of any fundamental issues. Like it actually shares a lot of the same infrastructure with Visual Studio's edit and continue support, but more so the hot reload stuff that was added in 6 for when you're not debugging. Because there's like two types of hot reload. There's the when the debugger's running, hot reload, and then there's when the debugger's not running, hot reload. They're quite different mechanically. Yeah. And .NET Watch obviously uses the one without the debugger because there's no debugger in .NET Watch. It's just running your app. And then it has like an outer loop, effectively, where it's monitoring files on disk for changes because there's no editor, right? .NET Watch is just a command line tool, so it doesn't know that you're typing in an editor and seeing a buffer change or anything like VS does or VS Code. It's just looking for file changes. So in my experience, historically, there's been a few places where flakiness gets in. One is that file change notifications on some systems, for whatever reason, can be flaky. And like on Windows, it's pretty good. We've seen things on certain Linux distros and even on Mac where whether it's what we're doing, what .NET's doing, or just how the OS file system works there, it just doesn't always detect everything. And so obviously if you don't get the notification, then you'll get a bad experience because we won't detect that there's a change. The other time that can have errors, just the normal hot reload thing, like what is compatible with a hot reload level change versus a fallback to shutting down the app, recompiling and restarting the app, like a restart, right? Which is what .NET Watch used to only do, the latter.
Yeah.
And obviously we invented hot reload and did it in 6 and we added it to .NET Watch. And then there are things like, well, what type of app are you watching? Is it a Blazor app, or a Razor app, which has another level of complexity? Is it a web app that relies on the CSS bundling feature of Razor compiler, which has another level of complexity, which is a whole other mechanism? And now the watch mechanism has to understand that if this CSS file changes, that's not just a simple refresh the file in the browser. I need to run a specific MS build target to go and recompile that bundle and then tell the browser to refresh. So there's a lot of moving parts. But my understanding was, I'm not aware of any outstanding issue. I just please log issues if you find them.
Yeah.
And give us a little bit more detail. I know it can be hard because some things just feel unreliable. And sometimes you just you use the thing, in your experience with it for the project you're working on is that it just feels like it works less than it does. It doesn't work more than it does work. And when you try and get them to narrow it down, it's just difficult. It just doesn't work. Anything I try is not working. And most of the time I find, I have that experience a lot of the time as well. It comes down to a specific thing in your project that is causing the whole thing to become flaky. And that specific thing often is just some complexity that's resulted in some bug in the way the hot reload's working.
Yeah, I think this is it. It's multiple things working together that as a user, I'm not thinking through, oh, there's .NET Watch, there's hot reload, there's the project.
Which you shouldn't have to. You should just, I want to run the thing and just have it work. I get it. Yeah. It's just as we're all software engineers. We know it's hard to reproduce if we don't have detail. So
one thing that I always like for that sort of thing is some sort of indication, what went wrong. For instance, unable to, this is a root edit caused because you edited.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work in hot reload to improve that. So I know VS now will show by default the reason for hot reload cannot be applied. Change cannot be applied due to a root edit. It will tell you the change. It'll say, hey, cannot change a protected member, blah, 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 whatever it might be. I thought .NET Watch actually would echo that stuff as well, because all that data is there. And it's just about making sure we expose it in a user helpful way rather than just spam you with a bunch of stuff. The more challenging ones is when it's just this is a supported change. I know it's a supported change, but you're telling me that the project changed in a way that can't be applied, or you're saying there's a build error when there's not a build error, or you're not detecting the change at all. It's those kind of state management issues that can be really frustrating. And for the user and for us to try and diagnose. But all I can say is please keep logging the issues and try and help us narrow them down.
Cool. Let me see. I don't know. This one's okay. Ability to override the new operator as well as activator and dispose.
That isn't a new request, by the way. That actually, I've heard that several times. Let me control what happens when my object gets created and destroyed.
Could you do that using an interceptor?
No, no, you can't today because they only support hooking method calls.
Oh,
you can't hook new.
Okay.
Yeah, no way. That one that's a cool thing to talk about. I don't see how we do that in C#. It basically makes C# super unsafe in the super obvious mainline code path. Right now, you have to write unsafe.
Oh,
not always true. You have to write unsafe to do unsafe things is kind of the mantra. We don't want normal safe code looking unsafe code looking like safe code. So I don't see a world where we allow new and dispose or new and out of scope to just call your stuff. I think maybe there'll be other things to give more control over pooling in the future. This foot gun is C++.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I guess here, just a quick, there's a question about what are we doing here? What sort of chat is this? So this is .NET Community Stand-Up. And the idea here is this is kind of behind the scenes where we talk with product team and we just kind of, especially this point in the product cycle, .NET 8 is pretty much wrapped up and we're getting ready to release it. We're doing the final things to document and talk about it when it goes live in November. So this is kind of an early chance to just chat about .NET 9 where we can still maybe, although, I guess that's a good question. The planning cycle, planning's already happening for .NET.
It starts
9.
now. If you want
every year,
time frame.
There's a plan the planning cycle, which I'm not even joking. And so that'll start soon. The team is still primarily focused on execution and delivery right now of 8 because we're not done. We've still got another RC to put out, and then we've got a final release to put out. But yeah, there's a sort of a planning exercise that gets kicked off around this time every year. And then there's an effort to try and improve it based on what we did last year and what did we learn and that type of stuff. It gets a bit meta, which can be, it's normal. It's, I think every team has that kind of thing, and it can be sometimes we like to laugh at ourselves about that. But yeah, so like now is a good time. What I find interesting about these types of Twitter threads is just the kind of low level esoteric stuff that people ask for. Like some part of me expects when you say, what would you like to see in the next version? You would get very high level type of feature requests. Like, I don't know, like something in Razor Pages, something in Blazor, like, can you make it do this and this, please? Or make it easy to do XYZ in tooling. But there are a lot of people who are just like, I want to be able to hook new, or I want to like these really low level cross-cutting things, which is kind of mad scientist level stuff. It always surprises me.
I've done this enough times, like internally as well, to understand the spectrum of requests.
The type of asks,
and it spans from super specific, give me this API, to let me write WinForms and have it render in the browser. Right? I think it really depends on kind of what you need. There's a lot of people thinking about what they need to make it easier for them to do something, and it's like, can you do this insane thing? Then they'll be like, well, even thinking through the steps to make that possible, like kind of tricky, right? Like not trivial. And I love when I ask people for more detail, then it forces you to kind of think through the ask a little bit more to see, like, do you really want this? Do you need this? And that often happens on issues. People will file issues saying, can you add X? And like, we'll come back a year later and say, is this done yet? And it's like, there's no detail, there's no scenarios. You just ask for this like super obscure thing. You kind of have to do the GPT where you're fixing the prompt to get more information to figure out what is really being asked for, unless it's super clear, right, and obvious that.
I mean, I've heard Hanselman say that before, like, somebody, I mean, this is old school now, but like somebody walks into the cell phone store and says, I want a bigger antenna on my phone. And it's like, why do you need a bigger? Well, because my performance, I drop my connection going through tunnels or whatever, right? It's like, okay, what problem are we solving?
Exactly.
And it's all, there are different, we have a lot of people using .NET and literally millions of developers. And so they operate at different levels. Like a lot of people never get down below the understanding of what APIs to call. Like they're extremely proficient when it comes to writing apps in .NET. They understand most of the app level language primitives, and they know all the APIs they can call to build apps. And they never think about underneath that line. They just never, they don't write libraries for other people. They don't do anything kind of advanced. And then there are other people who like think all the way down to the assembly being generated by the JIT, right? And like they want that, and that's like a whole other world compared to just writing an app in C#, right? And they're both perfectly valid, and we invest in both levels. And that's part of one of the fun things about our product, and the challenges is trying to figure out how do we allocate time and investment across the full spectrum of what .NET is, which is pretty deep. There's a lot of layers. So
and I want people to understand that just because a lot of people ask for something, it doesn't mean it will happen. I think there's this sense of everyone's asking for, or this person's asking for, or it's been open since .NET 3 and you didn't do it yet. There's a combination of like people asking, us having to do research to understand a scenario, and our desires. Like, do we want to have this be the direction that we go in, right? There's a thing in the chat talking about, could we add a PDF reader into the framework? And it's not that we couldn't do it. Like we could add anything you ask for into the framework, but like, should we do this? What should we do this versus like having people in the ecosystem have one? One of the eternal struggles we have is our customers, rightly so, expect everything in the box, literally everything. They'll take any project that they have used in a NuGet package and will ask us to put it in the box. And we'll go like, no, we won't do that. Keep using the package. But why? Why don't you just put this in the box? And it's like, why do you need it in the box? And I understand like it's supported, it's there. If we keep doing that, we would literally have this never-ending growing framework of everything out of the box, right?
Yeah.
So there's this line we have that I think maybe isn't fully called out or drawn anywhere in public, but there is this line I think in the back of our heads around that's too far. That shouldn't be in the framework, or you know, it hasn't reached the point of ubiquity that it should be in the framework, because the thing needs to be pervasive and it needs to have staying power. It can't be a thing that is like fleeting. I think there's a lot of thought that kind of goes into when or why we do stuff. So you will get frustrated because we will not ship discriminated unions, which everybody wants. For like,
I want them.
I want it. Like, we want it in the framework. Like, it's not as though we don't want to do them, but like any software team, they're like, you know, things to solve and issues to get over to make progress, right? So
yeah, I mean, then you know, I remember like way back before working at Microsoft, going through with Reflector and finding passports, or I found namespaces for passport authentication in system.web and stuff like that, right? And I was like, you know, I mean, you end up with this big unmaintainable thing if you ship everything, right? Because use cases change over time. Like, you got to ship a tight focused product and then people can add on other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then also I feel like if Microsoft shipped PDF support, there would be APM who would have that as one of their things they were tracking, right? And then there would be a dev that did a little bit of work on it, and then it might release in .NET 9. But how much is it going to be maintained and updated for new PDF support and vulnerabilities 2 years later, right? When the PMs move to another project, and you know what I mean? It's like,
well, I mean, if it's in the framework, it'll be.
We have to.
It has to, but I mean, are they going to love PDF the same way that a company or a passionate community that's shipping a PDF package?
We have examples of this already. Like the zip support was like this in the framework, right? And so
zip, a lot of them.
Yeah, it doesn't support every bell and whistle that you can possibly do. And there are many file formats, protocols that we don't support in Box that are used in places, and they still doesn't meet the level, you know, to Fowler's point, that we feel like it deserves to be the next thing that we prioritize and spend resources on and put in the box for the next release.
I like what Dennis is saying here. Like, some stuff for the community, right? Like, why not? You know?
Oh yeah, community and ecosystem, and like, well, and it is zero sum. At the end of the day, we are a finite. You know, people look at Microsoft and see a multi-trillion-dollar company, and it's not the .NET team. Sorry, and you know, a lot of Microsoft runs on .NET, so obviously it's well invested in. But the team might not be anywhere near as big as you might expect it to be, especially when you consider how much of the team has to be spent on maintenance and turning the crank to ensure that we can produce reliable software and that we can react to things like security incidents and stuff. There's a lot of costs associated with doing that part. It's not just people slapping on keyboards, putting features out every day. Like, which I'm sure it's not for most professional developers. Like, people understand that, I think. And so it is zero sum. Like, when we choose to do one feature, it means we're choosing not to do another one or three other ones if they were the same size. And we don't always get it right, or you don't always agree with us. And that's part and parcel of having a product. Fine. Like, that's just the reality of the world. And we have millions of customers and they don't all agree on what's more important. And then we have strategic goals as a product, you know, put aside the fact that we're a framework and a language and a tool, we're also a product, and we have organizational product strategy and focus, which is separate from the open source project. And that influences where Microsoft spends its dollars when building .NET as well. And I think that's well understood. Like, I don't think that's contentious. I think like that's why Microsoft does spend money building .NET. And so sometimes those things get higher priority than something that you might care a lot about. But we try and balance that. Like, we do our best across the team to really try and balance that. And, you know, talking about planning, we talk about top down and bottom up planning, and we try and balance that every release as well. Like, to your point, John, the team working on a particular feature or product area is typically the ones that knows their customers best. They're the ones that hear the screams, that react to the GitHub issues. And so the bottom-up process is like, well, that team should make sure that they've got capacity to address the top issues and top feature requests that their customers are asking for. But they also have to leave capacity for the top-down asks coming from the product owners. And that's a balance that shifts from release to release, from team to team. That's just the reality of doing business.
Mm-hmm. And investment shifts as well. So like as a result of those two forces, we may choose to invest in Signaler more next release, or MVC more next release, or some other area, right?
Right.
So you'll see shifts in investments from release to release based on kind of the combination of bottom up and top down work.
Right. And as others have pointed out in the chat, as anyone who works in software development knows, you don't get linear scaling with adding more software developers to a project. Like like not infinitely anyway. Like certainly for some things that are highly parallelizable, you can do that. But then there's an added cost. There's an overhead associated with every new set of hands on keyboards that has to be paid. And then there are tipping points where that cost can suddenly, that debt, you can't avoid it anymore. And now you have to spin up another team to manage the fact that you've added 10 new people over here. We are also a global company, so we have to care about laws and requirements and whatnot that a lot of software development groups don't have to, because you're building software just for your team or whatever it might be. But we're building an international product. We have partners. So we have partners that take the .NET source code and they build it themselves and ship it in their product, whether it's internal at Microsoft like PowerShell, or a partner like Red Hat that does it in their Linux distribution. That's a lot of investment required, continuous
life cycle for all of them.
And I think people would agree that that's worthwhile. Like we get a lot of benefit and they get a lot of benefit out of that. But I think sometimes it's worth just remembering that there's a lot of stuff we have to do that isn't just adding an API to your thing that you want to.
I think too, it's important to be clear as much as possible about what our product focus is and isn't, because so people know what they can rely on us to stick with long term, so they can invest in. But then also, somebody in the chat said, please let my company continue to exist. And say you're a PDF producing company, right? It would, like, Microsoft could jump into a bunch of different things and lay waste to it by shipping a PDF, and now they're an image editor, and now they're doing UPCs, whatever, scanning. And it's like, but then like it's good to kind of signal, hey, we're focused on delivering a runtime that's for developers to ship, these sorts of apps. And then the ecosystem and the other like software vendors can kind of get a feeling of like, here's the empty spaces where we feel safe developing a product in, which is good.
I wish, I agree with you, and but I also kind of think it's not that simple. I wish it was. Like, I think we're not simple like Node is simple. Like Node is really simple product. Like go and look at the source code, go and look at the docs on the Node website. There's a very finite amount of things you can do with it. Node's power is the ecosystem behind it. And also it's problems in some way. Similar with Java and Go and lots of other stacks. We are actually not like a lot of other stacks. There's very much not a stack like us. We are in some ways a product of our when we were born and of a previous time, and then we've adapted and grown and changed as the industry has changed, but it's still left us being a product that is quite different from other products. And we tried in the beginning of .NET Core, as Fowler will remember very well, we tried, like, what would we look like if we modeled ourselves more on something like Node? And we got a very strong rejection from the community.
I remember that.
We're doing that. And so we think we found a fairly good balance. But to your point about, making it clear, we're building, this is our goal, I think sometimes it's very nuanced, and it's hard to articulate in a single message that resonates with anyone who's asking that question. And so often it requires a discussion that's tailored to the audience asking the question, rather than just a simple manifest we can stick on dotnet.com. It is kind of difficult. The closest we've ever gotten, I think, is Fowler once said that we're a batteries included framework. And that's kind of and that speaks to what we were talking about before about, well, it should just be in the box. And there's challenges to that. There's two sides of that coin. If we say we're batteries included, then it is natural for folks to say, great, put this battery in, please, because I need that battery. My app needs that battery.
Add more.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it is nuanced and it's evolving. And 1 year when we think we're going to be in a certain thing for the long haul, that can change next year because the industry changes. And if we don't change, we know we might upset 10,000 people who looked at what we did the previous year and said, I thought it was clear you were in this for the long haul, even if we didn't explicitly say that, because we have a support life cycle, it's 3 years, and LTS, that's what it is. But we don't have a crystal ball like anyone else in the industry doesn't have one, and we don't know where the next big shift is going to come from. And so it's not always, we don't always get the timing perfectly. I think there are some things we've done well on, even in retrospect, like our investment in Kestrel, in aspnetcore specifically, and our investment and focus on performance and protocol support, like HTTP2 and HTTP3, really early, like earlier than most other mainstream open source service stacks. I'm proud of that. Like, we made that choice. That was a bet. It required a lot of internal partnership as well. And it wasn't without its frustrations or complications. Like, we added HTTP2, but nothing in Azure supported it. So we went out with our product saying, look, we've got HTTP2.
Like, hey, I get to demo this. How can
people
I
would
run
say, how do I
this?
run it on your cloud? And we'd say, you stand up a VM, because none of the PaaSes supported it, right? So it's not, we have to deal with that. It's like, okay. And then Fowler in particular has done a lot of work to help partners adopt Kestrel and get that support in some of our Azure PaaSes and stuff. But that cycle continues every release. It's never as straightforward as we just have to worry about what's in the open source repo, or we just have to worry about what's in File New in Visual Studio, or we just have to worry about what our Azure partners or our third-party partners are asking. It's always some combination of all those things.
Okay. Well, I know we're getting shortish on time. I think two things we should wrap up with. There's one kind of meta question I wanted to jump to, and then when we finish too, I want to make sure we allow talk about like how can people get their suggestions and stuff in. So I'll get to that next, but this just general one. There's a few that are saying this, like more stability and performance, less change, and then there's some other things like delay, do minor, don't do major features, like. Yep. So I think a thing, there's a little bit of like fatigue on some people's.
Did John freeze?
Did we lose John?
We could talk about this one though. This is
I think we get the point, right? Yeah.
We had an internal discussion recently about some of the comments on that blog post that Richard wrote, and about some of the comments in my tweet. And we were talking about, do you ever feel a sense of mastery if the thing you're trying to master keeps moving? And for some people who really want mastery, like that can feel like a pain, because you're trying to know the entire language, the entire framework. You feel like you've like mastered these things, and then Span comes out, and then this comes out, and that comes out, and you're like, why do I have to keep learning new things, right? Like that just, it sucks. Fortunately, I would say that is not just a .NET thing. That is industry wide, and in other ecosystems, it's worse than others. Node, but I think there is merit to some of the complaints about the speed. It doesn't mean that I think we should stop or slow down, but I feel the empathy of like, how do you master something that keeps changing, right? So I think there will be discussions as we get more mature about, what kinds of language features do we add in every release? Do we do every 2 years? But there's been no actual concrete changes. It was just an acknowledgement of, yes, it makes sense, because like, if you're trying to master something, understand it, like not have to learn new syntax when you're seeing code reviews. The hardest thing for me personally to understand when I was kind of, I guess when we started this journey of having a release every single year, was I'm someone who embraces the new, like naturally. So whenever a new feature comes out, I'll find ways to use it. Like, we should just use this new thing. But there's this other side of the coin where it becomes a burden. Imagine you're on a team and you have figured out C# and you have all these rules. And now someone new joins, or someone who wants to use the new stuff joins, and they add all this like syntax that looks to you crazy because you are used to like C style, home base, like if statements, and this like very clear, structured code. And I think it's funny the adjectives people use when they describe some of the new syntax, because it really shows you the lineage, right? And I think that is right, because we came from a C-based language. It's C#. Like C is a fixed, simple language. It's supposed to look like this. What is this arrow syntax? Like, why are you adding F# style glyphs to my language, right? There's a real sense of like loss of ownership of like, this used to be my language, and now you've made it into something I don't understand, and it's C++. So I think the complaints are valid, but personally, I think the changes have been quite nice overall. Yeah.
I think the short answer is humans are complex.
Yeah.
And we absorb lots of different things into our sense of self and identity. Like, I don't want to get too profound, but Fowler and I have long said in the team that it's very clear that some people associate their code with themselves, and they feel it when someone says we're going to delete that code. And one of the things that we used to say to new developers was like, you're not your code. You need to not get attached to the code you wrote. Like, this code is going to live as long as it needs to live for, and then it's going to go away. And I think I made that realization a long time ago in my career, that it's just code. Like, it's literally called software because it's designed to be changed. That's the whole intent of it being. But people get attached to their work. People absorb things into their sense of self, and so and part of that is this idea of mastery, or this idea of understanding your domain and the world that you live in. And so they get strong feelings about things. But also, developers are kind of a quirky bunch, and I'm part of that cohort. So I think we all often joke about how kind of quirky we can be, and like how is it that two people in the exact same industry who have the same experience and can argue so vehemently about brace style or white spacing or like dot comments or regions or like all these things. It's just like, it's so stupid. But it's part of what makes our industry so fun, and part of our industry, and it's just part of our makeup. And so I think, again, as a product, we had to strike a balance. We had to look at what the industry was doing. We had to look at what our own history was with our product. And I think the balance is well made. We're never going to be able to suit everyone. And I know some people don't agree with us. I know some people are just like, no, if you just made LTS 5 years, that would solve all the problems and no one would hate you anymore, or everyone would be happy. And, it's just not true. Like, there are trade-offs in doing that would mean some other person or some other group of people would get less than they currently get, and they would be upset with that because they have no interest in a 5-year LTS at all. And that's just the reality. We have to pick a balance, and we listen to the feedback and we consider it, as Fowler said, and we do make changes when we feel it's necessary. But yeah, this pace, I think, overall has been good for the product. We are empathetic with folks who feel it's overwhelming. I used to know everything about CSS in 2010.
Oh my God!
Now I know less that I know about CSS than I know about CSS.
I used to feel like such a CSS star, and now I look at it, I'm like, what is all this stuff? Right? Yeah.
So I get it, but I still think that is the nature of our industry. It's just the nature of the industry, and C# is modern. .NET is a modern stack. It's not a legacy stack, and legacy stacks don't change. Modern stacks keep evolving.
I feel like an important thing too here is that the backwards compatibility thing is real, and it's good. So like, for instance, if you feel overwhelmed, I don't know, I'm always telling people like, upgrade to the new .NET, and you don't have to use all the new features. You basically, I don't know, like, there's all these analogies. It's like your favorite story just added a new wing, right? Or you just downloaded a new DLC for the game. Like, you unlocked some new capabilities, but you don't have to use them. So just, you know what I mean? Like, for the most part, like, I was looking through breaking changes for .NET 8 the other day, and they're pretty minimal and focused, like, for the most part. I would feel pretty comfortable upgrading a .NET 7 app to .NET 8 pretty quickly, and so I don't know. I feel like I get that I personally feel overwhelmed sometimes. Like, what is all this new syntax? What are all these new APIs? You don't have to use them in order to just take advantage of faster performance. And, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it gets tricky when you're on a team and one person on the team wants to like use the new features. Yeah. So I think what ends up happening to people who really get annoyed at the changes are someone sends a pull request and now it's my problem. So I can't ignore it. Like you would think if you don't want to use the new syntax, don't use it. But software is a team sport. So now your team has to all agree to not use features, right? We had this big debate when we first did aspnetcore and it was like VAR. Are we going to use VAR?
The one that came to mind.
VAR or not to VAR?
And it's funny. The ASP.NET team and the .NET team, like the core runtime team, disagree on VAR. So if you look at .NET runtime, VAR will only exist when the right side is very clear. Yeah. And on the ASP.NET code base, you'll see VAR everywhere. All right. It's just funny. It's just like same overall team, like two different sets of people that chose different things, and those things happen in software all the time, even in the same company. So
I guess one last thing just to wrap up here is for people as they're starting to think about, like, this Twitter thread is cool, but for people that like formally want to make requests or get involved in discussions on next version, is this GitHub issues? If you're not sure, where do you put it, like that sort of thing?
Definitely GitHub is where we will triage. I would say if you don't do this, I won't say it like too much, but like upvotes and hearts on issues do matter, at least to a point where we will pay more attention to things that have more upvotes. One of the reasons we decided to work on off this release was because of the number of likes and upvotes on that specific issue. So if you file an issue and you have no upvotes and your issue doesn't seem to be one that like is, I guess, part of the overall vision, we have that thing, themes of .NET, where we have high-level themes that kind of plumb down to scenarios. Sometimes work gets pulled in because it made its way from like it happens to coincide with one of our existing scenarios. But if you're gonna file a bug about a PDF reader, I can tell you for sure we'll just ignore it until we'll put it in the backlog or in future, right? Because that's not happening. It's not a thing that we're gonna do in the short term. But definitely look for upvotes. If you don't follow the issue, it won't happen. I'll just say one thing I see pretty often is people will suggest things at me on Twitter that are like reasonable and could be done. And it's like, we're open source. And if you follow the bug, sometimes someone else has the same concern. We'll find your issue and we'll send a fix. Like sometimes the fixes are just like small and paper cuts and we'll fix them. If they're big features, that's where it gets more complex because it requires back and forth between like, do we want this? Should it be in here? Should it be in your own package? But yeah, definitely file issues and upvote other issues. Oh, okay. No. I have to mention before we go, AOT keeps coming up.
Yeah, a lot.
We do want to do more AOT in 9. The goal is to like do more of the framework to make sure that things work. It's going to be slow. There's so many features that don't just work.
Not the performance. He means the process of making things native AOT compatible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, yes, that's right. Trying to make the entire framework all work at once was too much work in 8. Just making minimal APIs work.
Yeah.
Like the dependency graph of things that we had to make function to make minimal work taught us a lot about how to do the other parts of the stack. So I think in 9, we're hoping to tackle like MVC and SignalR and have those things work. We actually have ideas of how they can work. EF, for example. So I'm hoping we will get to a place where at least most of the heavily used parts of .NET are AOT compatible. And once you're compatible, it's easy to stay compatible. the first hump is like getting there. You make all the big changes and all the big design changes, and then once you're there, new features just end up having to be compatible because you're now thinking of them when you're building it to begin with, right? I think that is the big issue today with trying to retrofit native ALT on existing .NET. Like patterns kind of make it really hard to do certain things. So we're learning from our experience, and hopefully the broader ecosystem also does that as well. And I'm hoping that will be a big source of future work for us.
Cool. All right, we should probably wrap up before my browser crashes again. I don't know what. This was awesome. Thanks a bunch. And yeah, so I anytime I can rope you folks in, I will. And so let me know when a good time is to do another.
For sure.
And, all right, I will play the thing before my computer catches on fire. Thanks, everybody.